Hey guys, it's Julian, and today I'm super excited to be bringing you the much requested how to make crunchy electro techno in the style of the Advent. As usual, you can get the full project file, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that you just heard in the intro that I'm about to break down in this video is available right at the top of the description, and if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because it's already available. And let's dive in. Alright, so here's the project file. We're at 145 BPM, a little bit faster than a lot of this other electro stuff. Like, this is probably the fastest electro video I've made on this channel. But it just kind of makes it a bit more aggressive, a bit more intense. And the first thing that we have here would be the 808 sounds. So as you can hear, the drums for this track are pretty much all 808 sounds, and that's really what you want to work with here. Like, the sound sourcing is really not going to be too crazy for this style of track, because you essentially just want to start with 808 sounds, especially like that kick and the snare. Like, I would use that pretty much like almost exclusively for this style. And then you can bring in sounds from other drum machines on top as well, like pretty much any of the classic Roland drum machines, like the 707, 606, 909, 808, all of these, even like the 727, are all going to work for this style of techno. And then you can see, like, we've got a bit of processing on each of these. Like, we have drum bus on almost all of them, but individually, so it doesn't get too crunchy, but it just adds a lot of nice, like, fatness to them. Because that's kind of the thing about this, is like, it's easy to find 808 sounds, but it's two things. One, you have to find really, really good 808 sounds. Like, it can't just be like, just the default 808 in whatever like drum pack you're using. It has to be like a really good fat 808 kick that's recorded nicely. And then on top of that, the second part of it is you have to also process it well. You can't just take the dry sounds, because what's going to happen if you just take like completely dry 808 sounds is you're going to have all this other stuff here, all this like synths and effects down here, and then they're going to be super fat, super huge, and then you're just going to have this like weak sounding drum machine essentially. So you really got to process these and just give them a bit more texture, and then it can be a bit crunchy, You can see we've got like a bit of reverb on the rim shot here. And there's the layering also with the clap and the snare. That's pretty important. So we get the snare on its own, it's pretty punchy. The clap on its own has like that nice like to it. But when you put them together, that's how you really get that like super punchy snare essentially. It's just layering them together. But if you miss that detail, a lot of times like it can be easy to overlook, but if you do actually end up overlooking that, you're going to just kind of have a little bit too soft of a snare. Like, it's going to be missing something. It's going to be like, especially if you just use the snare, like, that'll get lost in the mix a little. Because it's really just in there for that, like, but then if you add in the clap, it just really helps it stand out a lot more. And then we got some drum bus on that, and an EQ. And then on the hi-hats, same deal, just a bit of drum bus. The main thing with these is just the energy from that open hi-hat, because if I play you just the closed one on its own, it's a pretty energetic pattern. But having that hi-hat come in with you can hear what that adds. So that's a small detail, but it's going to make a big difference. So yeah, again, with the drums, it's not too hard, but you just have to start with the 808 sounds. I recommend you start with like the kick and the snare. Just get like a nice fat 808 kick and a clap and a snare together. Get a cool pattern with those. And then you just keep going with the 808 sounds, and maybe even bring in sounds from other drum machines as well. Now the next thing down here, in terms of like groups of sounds, would be all these little effects. Which, when I play them on their own or all together like this, but like just these, you can hear that like there's a bit of a groove happening between these. So essentially what's happening is, like if we just have the basic synths, like the main synths that are right up front, and the drums on their own, it is nice, but it's a bit boring. It's kind of missing some depth. It needs something that's a bit in the background to just add atmosphere to the track and really kind of like just fill it out and keep it exciting as well, and also just to add some nuance. So there's a lot of things that these layers add, but the idea here is that they're just kind of these more subtle, different background effect sounds. And you can hear what that adds to the track when, now that you've heard it without these and then with them. And this is not the kind of thing that like the average listener is even going to hear right away when they hear the track, but they are hearing it on a very subconscious level. This is working on a very subconscious level for like 99% of music people who aren't music producers, because this stuff does add a lot of energy. You know, your brain is processing everything that it's hearing. It's just, if you're not really like able to pick apart the elements of a track, then yeah, you're not going to be able to be like, oh, there's a background noise percussion which is turned down minus 17.7 dB in there. But yeah, so most of these are just audio. Like you can see we have like this one down here, which has a bit of reverb and delay, just kind of like a noise stab. And then this one down here, which is audio, but then what I've done here is I've actually taken a bit of vinyl noise. Just like a nice crunchy vinyl noise. This is one I had recorded. And then I've just taken it and I made it into like a little stab because I've shortened the amplitude envelope. So you just get like a cool little, but it's got a ton of texture because it's of course this super textured sound. And yeah, so I definitely recommend trying that. Like just taking different sounds, like especially things like this vinyl noise that a lot of people have used in many tracks. And especially like different Foley sounds, you know, and just taking them and making effects out of them so that it's not just like, you know, white noise and saw waves and square waves all the time, because that can get really dull. But this is a nice way to take a sample and make it your own and make something just a bit more unique for your track with it. And then up here we have this noise percussion, which is made with a synth, which really kind of comes in as part of the beat, like if I play it with the drums. You can hear what it adds, just having that little every time just gives it or every bar I should say, gives it just a bit more energy and something like, again, just like a bit more depth to it, because you have the drums that are going 100% of the time over and over and over, and then this thing is just like 3 hits every bar. So again, it's just adding depth to that, as well as to those background effects. And all this is doing is it's just made with white noise. It's just this shorter like little white noise here, and then I've got it going into a bandpass filter with a little bit of an envelope, and we also have the hard shaper on that. So those two things, the envelope, it's working exactly the same as like a volume envelope would, or really like a pitch envelope would, where essentially you're just giving it more of like a punch at the start of the sound. And then the shaper there just kind of makes it hit a bit more, it makes it a bit fatter. And then what we're doing is we're automating that filter frequency. So that's how you kind of get the like call and response, because you have the and this is also adding something really nice to the track. You know, that call and response, especially when it's so subtle like this, is just going to add so much movement and like just make your track, again, have much more depth. And then it's just going through a bit of echo, you know, to give it some space, a bit of drum bus, which really helps. Like when you're making noise percussion like this, it really helps to use drum bus because it can just kind of take it and make it feel more like actual percussion. You know, and less just like white noise coming from a synth. And speaking of synths, then we have the bass synth. So essentially the idea behind this pattern is it's almost kind of like an acid bass, which we do have a 303 down here that I'm going to show you, but this is the main bass, and what's happening is it's just playing constant 16th notes. So essentially the way that I started this pattern is like it's just playing F. So I went and just made a bunch of 16th notes with just F. So then like you have that just laid out, and that's essentially going to be the pattern. And then all you have to do from there is you just take it and you move some of those notes up and down. Like if I fold this, you'll really see like these aren't that far off. You know, for example, G sharp, F sharp, and F, and then F sharp. It's like that kind of dark, like sort of very simple scale. But then we're just kind of jumping across octaves. And then what really makes a difference here, what I learned while making this video, is that it really makes a difference where you put those octave jumps. And what I mean by this is like the way we're getting that dun 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 dun. That's a big part of the groove and the rhythm in this track. If I all of a sudden move this one down, it's a totally different thing. So it's something to keep in mind. Like, you don't just randomly move some of them to different notes and keep some of them on that one root note. You have to choose it based on essentially like where you want this to fit into the groove of the track. Because that's what's going to make it really like work with everything else. You know, like this bass line works really well with what's happening with the 808 kick. It's not just randomly placing the notes in different places. Now, for the sound on this one, it's made with analog. We just have this one analog here. There's no layering or anything like that. But what it is we have a square wave where you can see we have the pulse width being modulated with this LFO. So it's just kind of giving it a bit more movement, makes it a bit more exciting. We also have a saw wave, which is 2 octaves down from that. And then we have this going into a low pass filter. And the low pass filter is being modulated by 3 things. So, 1, we have an envelope on there, so that's that pluck. We have the key tracking, which basically makes it so that the higher notes are going to be more open with the filter. And the lower notes are more closed, which works really well when you're jumping across the different octaves like this. It makes it very dynamic. And then to make it even more dynamic, we have this filter frequency automation, which you can see there. That's the 3rd thing that's being modulated. And it just makes the pattern kind of build a little bit more, because you get like it kind of like builds up and then chills out a little bit and then builds up again. It gives it like a crescendo. And this is really the thing. Like when you have a really repetitive pattern like this, you want to have like multiple layers of movement. So we have like the notes, which are just constant. So that's like a very small movement. Then we have this one, which is very slow because it's just kind of like moving over the course of a bar. So then that's kind of like a slower movement. And you're combining those plus all the movement that's happening with the other sounds, like the call and response from the noise percussion. And this is really how it's all gonna like come together, you know? And this is how you want to think about it too. It's not just like, how can I make a cool synth sound? But more so like, how can a cool synth sound really suit the song really well? And then we have the amp envelope just like that. I have some vibrato and some unison. And then we have here sort of like the distortion chain. So I'm going to turn these 3 things off. Here's what it sounds like without these. That's just the synth coming right out of analog with a few things over here. But this is like the main part of the effects. And then with these. So you can hear, this is essentially like the type of sound you want to make coming out of the synth. It's just going to be like a more kind of like deep sound, but then the idea is that we're distorting it to be what we want. So the first thing here is this EQ8. This is just to kind of shape it a little bit, because the way distortion works is it's like the more signal you put into it, the more it's going to distort. So with EQ, you can cut certain things and boost certain things, and then the things that you cut will get distorted less. The things that you boot will get distorted, or that you boost will get distorted more. And it can really give you like a lot of control over the way the distortion behaves. So definitely recommend playing around with that. I have this one set like this. It's cutting out a bit of mud so that it won't be as messy with the distortion. Then we have this first chain of multiband distortion. So here's just that. So what this is we have this split into 3 different layers. We have the lows, which you can see don't have any distortion. We have the mids, which have this overdrive. And then the highs, which have this wave shaper on. To really give it that like nice crunch in the high end. And this is really good, because with this type of synth, if we just did like this overdrive or just this wave shaper, so the whole thing, it would get really messy. But if you do it on just the highs or just the mids, you can actually get a really good sound, because it sounds really good in those ranges. It just doesn't sound good in the other parts. So you just have to split it like this. So that's the first layer. And then we have this amp. You can see we've got the gain all the way up. And so that just gives it that last texture and like really kind of takes it fully out there. Because this kind of makes it like go away from being just like a basic saw wave synth. You know, it's like I was saying before. It's like if you just use basic saw waves with no kind of like coloring, or basic square waves, or just basic waveforms in general, are going to get boring. But this is a really good way to make them sound more unique. Then we have some echo. I have this erosion as well. Here's without that. And then with it, just kind of gives it a little bit more crunch. Then I have this compressor, which is sidechaining into this side track down here. So all this is it's the kick sample, you can see. But I've shortened it a ton, because if you try to sidechain things to an 808 kick, it's going to get really messy, because essentially the kick is just boom. So you're not really going to actually end up hearing the thing that you're sidechaining. But with this, we can still sidechain into that same pattern. But then it's muted, and then we're not having to be at the mercy of the length of the 808. And then you can just turn up the release to make it take longer for it to come back up. And then we just have this EQ just cutting out the lows, boosting the highs and mids a little bit, you know, just making it a bit crunchier, a bit more textured. And yeah, then we have this little pad. So all this is doing is it's playing an F minor chord. That's the key that we're in. It sounds really nice here, because the thing is that the bass synth and the 303 are just so like kind of aggressive. So just to hear like a nice beautiful minor chord in there is gonna fit. It's gonna be like just a really good juxtaposition, I think, with that. Now for the sound on this, it's made with 2 layers of analog. So the first one, and they're actually very similar. The first one is 2 saw waves going into a formant filter. So that's what that sounds like. That kind of gives us like the more mid-range and the highs. And then we have the amp envelope set like this. This sound kind of like fades in. And that's how we're doing that. It's just the attack, essentially. And then we just have some vibrato and some unison on this. You know, just giving it a bit more of like some flavor. And then the second layer is the same thing, 2 saw waves, but it's going into a low-pass filter. So this kind of fills out the bottom. And then same thing with the amp envelope and the vibrato and unison. So then those together, you get the best of both worlds. Again, I talk about this a lot, but this is what you want with layering, is to just kind of like make 2 sounds or 3 sounds, however many sounds you're layering, but sounds that are like very clearly not doing the same thing. Like, you wouldn't want to just layer 2 low-end ones together, because it doesn't make any sense. But to put the low-end one with the mids and highs one, you get the perfect sound, essentially. And you don't even have to do that much like effects to them, because it's already just sounding really good together. Those are just going through a bit of chorus, some shorter reverb, a high pass filter, and that is it for that pad. And the last thing down here is the 303. So the MIDI on this, in this part, it just slides out from F down to F. And then here, it's playing the same MIDI that the bass synth is playing, but I just went in and cut out like a few different notes here and there. So like, you can see like, there's all those little spaces. That's where the 16th notes were in the other one. So you kind of get a cool thing when these play together now, because they're playing the same thing. They're not going to clash. It's not like you have to worry about like playing notes that are going to harmonize with each other and just magically fit. But they're still playing different patterns, and it just has like a nice dynamic, I think, hearing these bounce off of each other. Now for the sound on this one, this is made with operator. It's a square wave and a saw wave layered together. There's no FM happening though, so they're just playing side by side. And then it's going into a bandpass filter, which has this envelope on it. You can see it's pretty long. That's usually what you want with a 303, is like a longer envelope. And then we're just giving a little bit of automation to the filter frequency. Because with the bandpass, you don't really need to move it too much to get like a lot of different flavors out of it. And we have a pretty high resonance on that. That's how you get the 303 sound. Then we have this amp. So here's without this. You can hear, obviously, it's not really quite the same thing, but then when we turn it on, It gives us a lot of nice crunch and really makes it sound like that modern 303 sound. And the secret to this is turning up the gain and also turning up the bass. It's going to give you more of like kind of what you want with the 303. Then we have 2 echoes. So this first one is just to give it a bit of space. Here's without it. And then with it, you can hear it kind of spreads the sound out. What we have here is just a really fast echo, and then it's on the ping pong setting. So it just gives you like this really spread out sound. And then the echo here is just to give it a bit more like kind of long delay. So you kind of hear that ringing out. It gives it a more like old school acid feel when you can hear the delay like that. And then we have this shorter reverb, giving it a bit more space as well. So the space effects are really important with the 303. Like, that's the thing. If you just do this out of the synth with like, you know, just like a saw wave and like some distortion, it's not really gonna work. You need these things to kind of like give it that like extra kind of professionalism, I think. And then we just have a high pass filter. And then finally, this utility here, which is just cutting out the volume here, and then it's like building up. Just a little thing, but it kind of makes it a bit more animated, because now it's kind of like, yeah, sort of rising up slowly while it's playing rather than just sitting in the same place the whole time. These are kind of like the little things that you can do to really give your track like a lot more movement and just make it feel more exciting, like having a little volume automation like that. And yeah, so that is going to be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. And let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Let me know if you want to see more of these electro videos. I love making them. Like I said in the beginning, you can get the full project files, samples, MIDI, presets, everything from this video is available right at the top of the description. And if you're patient on my Patreon, check there because it's already available. Thank you so much to everybody who picks this up. It really helps to support me and keep me going so I can keep bringing you guys videos every day. And yeah, thank you so much everybody, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.